can you just paint the broad strokes of what's involved? So somebody who's listening to this podcast is saying, okay, I'm doing hourly billing. I kind of get, why this is not good and why this is something that's more suitable for a massive law firm that is structured that way. But there's a lot of potential for me to create efficiencies, have a better experience for my clients, and at the same time, even be more profitable in the work that we're doing with our clients by transitioning to a different model. So what are the main steps required to transition? Because it's a scary move, right? It's basically changing completely how we do our business. And people are going to be afraid of, well, will I be able to actually pitch this to a client? Will I be able to get a client to agree to it? How do I position it? I think there's probably a pecking order that you've experienced as to what they need to do in order to move to this model. So if you can give us the broad strokes of that as kind of an outline for our listeners that they can follow if this is something that they need to do.
Sure, absolutely. Broad stroke, I'll start by saying it's an emotional process for firms. They are nervous. Can be a perception that they can't do a value billing until they know what other firms are charging. A lot of lawyers and attorneys want to know what other folks are doing. And that type of information, I see you laughing because it's so true, that type of information is very hard to get. So there really, as far as I'm aware, and I've actually done a lot of research on this, there really isn't a place to go for smaller firms, small to mid-size, to find out what their peers are doing other than talking to their peers. So
I think I'll jump in real quick because you bring up a really good point. And I want to point out that, first of all, when you start thinking about adopting this, you may be a front runner, right? Like you may be doing something other people are not doing, which gives you a competitive advantage because, believe it or not, somebody who's shopping for legal services would much rather pay more knowing that that's the most they're going to pay than leave it open-ended with a potential for possibly paying less because they're well aware that can end up being more. So people want a definitive price. They're willing to pay for it, and you shouldn't be afraid to charge for it. Second thing is that just because somebody else is charging something doesn't mean it's a good amount to charge, right? Either you can make really good money by charging less, and that gives you a competitive advantage, or they implemented the model incorrectly. They're going to be losing money. They're not going to be able to be successful with the way that they have it priced. And if you follow, you're going to be in the same boat. So really, you need to approach this from understanding, and I'll let Margaret weigh in on how to approach it. But what I would do with clients is, approach it from, you need two things, right? She said this is value-based, right? So what's the value to the client? That's one component, but then you have to look at your inputs to produce that for the client, right? Like, what is that going to cost you to deliver? And if you can't make the profit margin you need to make, then you need to adjust based on that. So Margaret, I interrupted you because this was a really good point, but carry on.
Sure, absolutely. So you mentioned inputs. I recommend everyone tracking their time. So you have an idea of the cost of that input. There are firms where everyone tracks time. There are firms where just attorneys do. There are firms where people don't track time because it's flat fee billing. But then how are you measuring your inputs against, the fees that you're charging? So that's one. Start tracking time if you're not really, and have everyone track their time. The next item is, you may consider just doing this for new clients and testing it. And then if you have some trusted, ongoing annuity clients, people really well, float it by them, get their feedback. But you can, to feel more comfortable, continue with the current billing for your current clients, but look at this for new clients. And the other item is, it goes back to the value, is, really taking a look at the value. Like, certain engagements warrant a higher fee than others. And be open to that. Keep an open mind and try to look at it from the client's point of view. How much pain are you solving for an individual? How efficiently and quick do you do that for someone? What is your experience? So an attorney that's been practicing for 50 years, they're not just bringing their current role, they're bringing their training and their experience to the table. Quite often, many attorneys are advisors. They're not just doing the legal work, they're actually strategizing and advising. There's a lot of value in that. And really take a look at the type of work you're doing and distinguish between the rank and file templated documents from the very strategic high value advising, and price accordingly. And once you're comfortable with those prices, be open to increasing them a little bit. Like, if you feel it's correct and the value is there. Psychologically, where many of folks are afraid to come in at a higher price point than they believe if they hear their peers are charging less. But as you noted, your peers may not be charging properly. And as a result, they don't have the resources behind the scenes because they can't afford them to provide better service to the clients. So again, track time, be really open with the value, and bring in help. It is helpful to have an unbiased opinion at the table with these types of decisions because it is emotional. Many attorneys are afraid to lose clients, and so it's easier not to make this change. But bringing help, track your time, and have a process where you move this project forward. Like meet at regular intervals with deliverables for each meeting by the participants, and just keep it moving forward and start with your new clients. And to feel comfortable, keep your current clients as is, unless you feel they would enjoy the change.
I'm just going to add one component, and that is to recognize that any of the flat fee models, whether it's value-based, whether it's flat fee, it's the law of averages at play. And one of the top things that I hear from law firm owners is, oh, I tried that and I got killed. Like I ended up producing so much work for a client and I didn't charge enough, but because it was flat fee, I didn't get paid enough. And they're taking that one example as a reason why it's not going to work. And that's going to happen for anybody, no matter how well you set this up, that will happen. What you need to recognize is that this model works through assumptions. And we're making our best assumptions, and you can tweak along the way. It's the law of averages at play, because there are going to be clients where you give them that flat fee and there's a lot less work that goes into it, and you made a lot of money on them. And we don't look at those and say, oh, wow, we made a killing on that client, right? And we almost feel like it's unethical to even think that way. But the reality is that you're providing a service, and sometimes that service takes more, sometimes it takes less, to implement that. So just keep that in mind as you implement this. You're not going to get it right on day one. There's going to be some situations where you feel like you got quote unquote killed, serving that particular client. But the reality is that if you stick to it and make adjustments along the way, it is the only way to unlock efficiencies and also create a great customer service experience for your clients.